The key wouldn't turn. I stood in the pouring rain with 2 heavy grocery bags digging into my fingers, my knuckles white from the cold. Through the glass pane of the front door, I saw my brother Cade. He didn't reach for the handle to let me in. Instead, he slowly slid the deadbolt into place. The metallic click sounded like a gunshot in the quiet evening. He looked at me through the window, his expression calm and detached, as if he were looking at a stranger rather than the sister who had spent the last 3 years raising his kids. "You've outstayed your welcome," Cade said, his voice muffled by the thick wood but perfectly clear. "Find somewhere else to stay tonight." I dropped the groceries. A carton of eggs shattered against the porch, the yellow yolks running like tears in the rainwater. Behind him, his partner Maribel watched silently. She had her arms folded tightly across her chest, her eyes cold and triumphant. This was the house I practically ran. I cooked the meals, scrubbed the floors, and wiped away the children's tears while Cade claimed he was busy rebuilding his life after his divorce. Now, he was locking me out. Then Cade dropped the ultimate bomb. "You were never a tenant, sis. You were just a guest." My heart hammered against my ribs. My suitcase was still inside. Everything I owned in the world, my clothes, my laptop, my memories, was behind that locked door. Then he added, "And don't think about coming back tomorrow." The bright porch light flicked on next door, casting a harsh yellow glare across the scene. I felt the weight of the neighborhood's gaze. Curtains shifted in the windows across the street. People were definitely watching the drama unfold. Humiliation burned hotter than the freezing rain soaking through my thin hoodie. I felt small, discarded, and utterly betrayed. "Where are the kids, Cade?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and heartbreak. I needed to see them. I had been their constant for over 1,000 days. "Asleep," Maribel snapped before Cade could even open his mouth. "They don't need your drama or your presence anymore. We are a family now, and you are just an outsider." Those kids cried for me at night when they had nightmares. They called me their second mom because I was the one who knew their favorite bedtime stories and how they liked their sandwiches cut. Now, I was being erased from their lives as if I were a smudge on a whiteboard. Cade cracked the door just an inch and tossed my phone charger onto the wet porch like I was a total stranger. "Take your junk and go," he muttered. I reached down to grab the cord, my fingers trembling. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from the oldest child. "Auntie, why are you outside? I hear the rain." I stared at the screen, the light blurring as my eyes filled with tears. I couldn't answer her without breaking down, and I didn't want to scare her. I didn't want her to know her father was being a monster. Instead of replying, I turned and walked toward my car, parked at the end of the driveway. I expected to find it empty, but as I clicked the remote, the interior light revealed a nightmare. The back seat was filled to the ceiling with black trash bags. They were stuffed haphazardly, some of them ripped at the seams. My belongings had been thrown in like actual garbage. My clothes were wrinkled, and my books were bent. At the very top of the pile sat a framed photo of me and the kids at the park last summer. I reached in and touched it, but my finger caught on a sharp edge. The glass was shattered into a spiderweb of cracks, obscuring our smiling faces. The disrespect was a physical weight on my chest. I began to dig through the bags, looking for my most important items. I checked the glove box, the side pockets, and under the seats. I felt a cold wave of panic wash over me as I realized the truth. My document folder was missing. My birth certificate, my passport, and the savings envelope I kept for emergencies were all gone. I didn't care about the rain anymore. I marched back to the house and pounded on the door with my fists. "Cade, open this door right now. Where are my documents?" I screamed. After a long minute, Cade opened it just enough to show his face. He actually had the nerve to smirk at me. "Oh, that folder," he said, leaning against the frame. "Consider it a small repayment for everything we've done for you." I felt the air leave my lungs. "Repayment for what, Cade? I've given you 3 years of my life." I shouted. "For all the years we let you stay here rent-free," he replied coolly. "Rent-free?" My mind raced through the last 36 months. I covered the groceries every week. I paid half the utilities. I bought the kids' school supplies, their winter coats, and their birthday presents. I was their unpaid nanny, their housekeeper, and their emotional support system. I had saved him thousands of dollars in childcare costs alone. Then he said the sentence that rewired something deep inside my brain. Honestly, you should be thanking us for the roof over your head. Maribel stepped forward from the shadows of the hallway and whispered, Actually, we already rented your room out to someone else. He's moving in tonight. A shadow moved behind them in the hallway. A man I didn't recognize waved tentatively from the doorway of what used to be my bedroom. My stomach dropped through the floor. The bed I had made this morning, the walls I had painted myself, they had already handed it all over to a stranger. You planned this, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. You've been planning to kick me out for weeks? Cade shrugged his shoulders casually, as if he were discussing the weather. We need real income now, sis. Maribel and I have big plans, and we can't have a permanent houseguest taking up space that could be generating cash. Real income. As if my 3 years of domestic labor, my sacrifice of a career, and my love for his children meant absolutely nothing because it wasn't a paycheck. I felt like a ghost in my own life. Then the new tenant walked closer and asked quite casually, Are you the babysitter who quit today? Cade said you were moving on to better things. Quit. I hadn't quit. I'd been erased and replaced within the span of a few hours. I turned away, unable to look at their smug faces for another second. My phone buzzed again in my hand, but this time it wasn't a child. It was a notification from the bank. Insufficient funds. I fumbled with my phone, my wet fingers sliding across the screen as I logged into my bank app. My heart stopped. Someone had transferred nearly every cent out of the account. It was the joint emergency fund, the one Cade had insisted we open when I first moved in. He told me it was, for the household, a way to make sure the kids always had what they needed. I had been depositing a portion of my small freelance earnings into that account for years. I thought it was our safety net. But as I looked at the transaction history, I saw a massive transfer made just 2 hours ago. Since Cade was the primary name on the account and I was just a secondary user, he had the power to drain it. Legally, it was his. I sat in my car, shaking so hard the keys rattled in the ignition. 3 years of sacrifice, of saving every penny, of putting my own life on hold to help my brother. All of it was gone with one click of a mouse. I was homeless, broke, and betrayed by my own blood. Just as I was about to start the engine and drive nowhere in particular, my phone rang. It was the school's late-stay program. Miss, are you picking up the kids today? The school is closing and no one else is answering their phones. Despite the betrayal, despite the rain, and despite the fact that I had just been evicted, I didn't hesitate. I drove straight to the school. Those kids didn't deserve to be left waiting in a dark hallway because their father was busy being a criminal. When the youngest saw me through the glass doors, her face transformed. She sprinted across the playground area, dodging puddles, and threw her arms around my waist. I knew you'd come, she squealed, burying her face in my damp hoodie. The teachers watched us with tired smiles, clearly assuming I was the parent. And why wouldn't they? I was the one at every parent-teacher conference, the one who signed the permission slips, and the one who knew exactly which kid was allergic to peanuts. For most days over the last 3 years, I was the only parent they had who was actually present. As the kids went to grab their backpacks, the school administrator pulled me aside. Her face was grave. I'm glad you're here, she whispered. I hate to bring this up now, but the tuition for the after-school program hasn't been paid in over 2 months. We've sent several notices to Cade. What? Cade had recently bragged about a promotion. He earned more than ever. That's when a parent standing nearby whispered to me, You didn't hear this from me, but your brother is planning to move very soon. My head was spinning as I buckled the kids into their seats. I told them we were going to get a special treat, just to keep them calm. While they were distracted with some fries, I pulled up a real estate app on my phone. A quick search of our address confirmed my worst fears. The house was listed for sale. It hadn't just been posted, either. It had been online for weeks. The photos in the listing were professionally staged. I looked closely at the pictures and felt a chill. My room had already been redecorated in the photos. My personal items edited out or moved. This wasn't a sudden decision fueled by a fight. This was a long-term, calculated strategy. Cade and Maribel had used me until the very last second. They needed me to keep the household running and watch the kids while they prepared the house for the market. They needed me gone before the final sale so they wouldn't have to share any of the profits or explain my presence to a buyer. It was the ultimate betrayal of trust. Then, as I scrolled down to the bottom of the listing to see the public tax records, I saw something that made my breath hitch in my throat. The house wasn't fully theirs. There was a co-signer listed on the deed. It was me. The memory hit me like a physical wave. 3 years earlier, when Cade was going through his messy divorce, his credit was in shambles. He had begged me for help to qualify for the mortgage on the new house. He had sat me down at the kitchen table, tears in his eyes, telling me it was the only way to provide a stable home for his children. "It's just paperwork, sis," he had said. "It's just to help me get through the door. I'll take care of everything." I was young, I was empathetic, and I trusted my brother. I had signed the papers without a second thought, believing I was doing a good deed for my niece and nephew. I never realized the weight of what I had done. Now, my name was legally tied to a property I'd just been locked out of. If Cade defaulted on the loan or if the house was sold under shady circumstances, my credit would be completely destroyed. I was on the hook for hundreds of thousands of dollars. I was terrified, but I also felt a spark of something new, anger. Pure, cold anger. I grabbed my phone and posted a cryptic status about being locked out. 5 minutes later, a lawyer friend from college texted me, "Call me immediately. Something in those records isn't right." I sat in a dimly lit parking lot, the kids asleep in the back of the car, as I talked to my friend. She went quiet for a long time while she reviewed the digital documents I had forwarded to her from the county registrar's website. I could hear the clicking of her keyboard over the line. Then she spoke, her voice slow and deliberate. "You're not just a co-signer on the loan, honey. Because of how the deed was recorded and the way you've been paying into the household expenses, you are technically a partial owner of that property." My breath stopped. I felt a strange tingle in my fingertips. "What does that mean?" I whispered. "It means," she replied, "that he had absolutely no legal right to lock you out. You have as much right to be in that house as he does. In fact, if he tried to remove you without a court order, he's the one breaking the law. Legally speaking, he might have just evicted himself by creating a hostile environment for a co-owner." The tables were starting to turn. The fear that had been suffocating me for the last few hours began to lift, replaced by a sense of power. Then she added, "And here is the best part. If that house sells, you are legally entitled to a massive share of the equity." For the first time since I stood on that rain-soaked porch, I managed to close my eyes. I didn't go back to the house that night. I took the kids to a cheap hotel, telling them it was a fun slumber party. I watched them sleep, feeling a fierce protectiveness. I slept fitfully, but for the first time, I had a plan forming in my mind. I didn't call Cade to scream. I didn't confront him yet. Instead, I spent the early morning hours gathering my digital footprint. I downloaded every bank transfer I had ever made to him. I found the emails where I discussed paying for the new water heater. I screenshotted the utility bills I had paid from my own account. I even found the old school invoices and grocery receipts I had saved in my email. I was building a mountain of evidence. I had proof of unpaid childcare worth tens of thousands of dollars, plus my direct financial contributions to the home's value. I wasn't just a guest. I was a partner who had been exploited. Just as I was finishing my file, Maribel called me unexpectedly. Her voice was trembling, stripped of all its previous coldness. "Please," she said, "don't make this messy." Maribel tried the guilt play immediately. She started crying, her sobs sounding forced and theatrical over the phone. "You know how stressed Cade has been," she pleaded. "The debt from the divorce is crushing him. He's just trying to get us on our feet. If you fight this, you're just hurting the kids." The translation was clear. "Let him win so we can take the money and run." I stayed silent, letting her ramble. When she realized the tears weren't working, her tone shifted instantly. The mask slipped, and the venom returned. "You're not even their real mother," she snapped. "You're just an aunt who overstayed her welcome. You have no right to this family or this house." That one cut deep. It was meant to break my spirit, but instead, it did the opposite. It hardened me. It reminded me that these people didn't care about my heart. They only cared about their own bank account. I realized I owed them nothing. Then she made a massive mistake. She slipped and said, "We already promised the buyer a quick closing next week. If you block this, we lose the deposit." I smiled to myself. That was exactly what I needed to hear. 2 days later, during a scheduled open house, I walked through the front door with my lawyer by my side. I didn't sneak in. I walked in like I owned the place, because I did. The realtor, a woman in an expensive suit, froze mid-sentence as she was showing the kitchen to a young couple. "So sorry, who are you?" the realtor asked, looking confused. She clearly hadn't been told about the third resident. I stood tall and handed her my business card. "I'm the co-owner of this property," I said loudly enough for the potential buyers to hear every word. "And I haven't authorized the sale of this home. In fact, there is an active legal dispute regarding the equity and my forced illegal eviction." The young couple's eyes went wide. They looked at each other and immediately started backing toward the door. Nobody wants to buy a house that comes with a lawsuit and a bitter family feud. The deal stalled instantly. Cade appeared from the basement, his face draining of all color when he saw me standing there with a legal professional. He grabbed my arm and pulled me into the pantry, hissing under his breath, "You're ruining my life. What are you doing here?" I looked my brother right in the eye. I didn't feel the need to shout anymore. "I'm not ruining your life, Cade," I said calmly. "You ruined it the night you changed the locks and threw my things into the rain. You ruined it when you stole my savings." He exploded, years of hidden resentment finally spilling out of him. "You were supposed to help temporarily," he yelled. "You were supposed to be the supportive sister while I got back on my feet. But you just kept hanging around, acting like this was your house." Temporary? I had given up 3 years of my life. I had turned down dates, skipped career opportunities in other cities, and spent my entire 20s being a surrogate mother to his children so he could go out and rebuild his social life. I had been his backbone, and he was treating me like a parasite. Before I could respond, the oldest child walked into the kitchen, having heard the noise. She looked at her father with a confused and hurt expression. "Why are you yelling at Auntie?" she asked. Silence fell over the room like a heavy blanket. The children were smart. They had been sensing the tension for weeks, and now the dam had finally broken. They started asking questions that Cade and Maribel weren't prepared to answer. Hard questions that cut through their lies. "Are we moving away from Auntie?" the youngest asked, her bottom lip trembling. "Why can't Auntie stay with us in the new house?" Cade tried to stammer out an explanation, but Maribel lost her patience and snapped at them to go to their rooms. The oldest child didn't move. She just stared at Maribel with a newfound coldness, then turned and walked away, pulling away from Maribel's reach. It was a powerful moment. Cade and Maribel thought they could just swap me out for a new life, but they forgot that attachment doesn't disappear overnight. You can't buy the kind of loyalty I had earned through years of bedtime stories and scraped knees. That evening, as I was gathering a few more of my things under the watchful eye of my lawyer, the oldest child slipped me a small, folded note as she passed me in the hall. It said, "Don't trust Dad. He's hiding a big box of mail in the garage." I took the note to my lawyer. Following the child's lead, we discovered a hidden bin in the back of the garage, buried under some old moving blankets. Inside were dozens of unopened letters. It turned out Cade had been living a double life. He had racked up massive personal loans and credit card debt that he hadn't told anyone about. The missing savings from our joint account? It hadn't gone to the house or the kids. It had gone to covering the minimum payments on his secret debts. The promotion he talked about was a lie. He was actually on a performance plan at work. The house sale wasn't an ambitious move to a better neighborhood. It was a desperate, last-ditch effort to liquidate the only asset he had left before the banks closed in. He was going to take my half of the equity to pay off his secret failures and leave me with nothing but a ruined credit score. He was willing to make his own sister homeless to save his own reputation. My lawyer looked through the pile of debt notices and smiled grimly. "If this goes to court, you have enough leverage to bury him. He's committed financial fraud." The next day, Cade showed up at the small office where I was doing some freelance work. He looked tired, but he was still trying to maintain his big brother persona. He sat across from me and slid a check across the desk. "Look," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I'll give you $5,000 right now. Cash. Just sign the release forms and walk away. We can put all this drama behind us and be a family again." $5,000. He was offering me $5,000 for 3 years of full-time, unpaid labor, thousands of dollars in direct household contributions, and my legal share of a house worth hundreds of thousands. I looked at the check and then I looked at him. I started to laugh. It wasn't a mean laugh. It was a laugh of pure realization. For the first time in days, the weight felt completely gone. "No," I said, sliding the check back to him. "Not even close, Cade." His expression shifted instantly from pleading to venomous. His eyes narrowed, and he leaned over the desk. "You'll regret that," he threatened. "I'll make sure the whole family knows what a greedy person you've become." Cade was true to his word. Suddenly, my phone was blowing up with calls and texts from relatives I hadn't spoken to in months. Apparently, the story going around the family was that I was extorting my brother. He told them I was refusing to move out and was demanding half his house even though he had graciously let me stay there for free. I was being painted as ungrateful, manipulative, and unstable. It was a classic smear campaign designed to isolate me and pressure me into giving up. My own mother called me, crying, asking why I was trying to ruin Cade's chance at a fresh start. It was painful to hear, but I had something Cade didn't have. I had receipts. I didn't argue with them one by one. Instead, I created a single group message for the entire family. I attached the bank statements, the deed with my name on it, the photos of my belongings in the rain, and the debt notices we found in the garage. I didn't add any insults. I just wrote, "Here is the truth. Decide for yourselves." The silence that followed that message was deafening. No one replied for 3 hours. An aunt who had always been the family's moral compass was the first to reply. "He did what?" she wrote. "He locked you out in the rain? And took your savings." Then another cousin chimed in, "We all saw you raising those kids. You were the one at every birthday party while he was out with his friends. This is disgusting." The narrative flipped overnight. Cade wasn't expecting me to fight back, and he certainly wasn't expecting me to be so organized. He had always relied on me being the quiet, helpful one, who would just take the hits to keep the peace. But the peace was already broken, and I had nothing left to lose. The pressure shifted from me to him. Family members started calling him, demanding he pay me what I was owed. The support he thought he had vanished into thin air. Then, the most important call came. It was Cade's mortgage lender. They had received the legal notice from my lawyer, and they told me directly that they needed my notarized consent to proceed with any sale or refinancing. The power had completely shifted into my hands. A few days later, I met with the kids for a brief visit. The oldest asked if we could go get ice cream, just the two of us. We sat at a small table in the corner of the shop. She stirred her sprinkles into her vanilla cone, looking down at the table. "Can we live with you instead?" she whispered so softly I almost missed it. My throat tightened, and I felt a sting in my eyes. I never wanted them to be caught in the middle of this legal war. I wanted them to have a happy, stable home, but I realized that their home with Cade and Maribel was built on lies and stress. Love doesn't ask for permission to be the primary bond, and they knew who had really been there for them. I told her I would always be there for her, no matter where we lived. I promised her that she would never lose me. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a maturity no child should have to have. Then she revealed something chilling. "Dad told us that once we move to the new city, we won't see you anymore. He said you were a bad influence and that we had to forget you." That was the final straw. I stopped being nice. I instructed my lawyer to file formally for my full equity share and a complete accounting of the stolen funds. No more phone calls, no more family drama, just the law. Cade panicked. The walls were closing in on him. The buyer for the house was threatening to pull out because of the clouded title, and if the sale fell through, Cade would face foreclosure within a month. He was staring down the barrel of total financial ruin. He had tried to play a high-stakes game of poker with my life, but he didn't realize I held all the cards. He realized that I wasn't going away and that I wasn't going to be bullied. He had lost his family's support, he was losing his partner's confidence, and he was about to lose his home. 2 days later, he called me at midnight. His voice was ragged, the sound of a man who hadn't slept in days. "Fine," he croaked. "I'll buy you out. Just tell your lawyer to stop the filing. I'll pay whatever we agree on." Now, finally, we were talking. This time, I was the one who named the number. I sat with my lawyer and calculated every penny. We added up the down payment contribution I had made, the 3 years of household expenses, and a fair market rate for the childcare I had provided for free. Then we added the $10,000 he had stolen from the joint account. The total was a big number. It was enough to change my life. When Cade saw the figure, he sputtered over the phone. "This is insane. You're taking everything," he yelled. But my lawyer was ready. She reminded him that if this went to a judge, he would also be liable for legal fees and potentially punitive damages for the illegal eviction and fraud. The math was undeniable. He could either pay me now and walk away with a small amount of cash, or he could fight me, lose everything, and potentially end up in legal trouble for the stolen documents and funds. He was trapped in a prison of his own making. After a very long, tense silence on the line, he whispered the words I had been waiting to hear. "Fine. I'll sign the agreement." On the day of the signing, we met in a neutral conference room at a title company. Cade looked much smaller than I remembered. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a grey, tired look. He wouldn't even look me in the eye as he scrawled his name on the documents. "I didn't think you'd fight back," he said quietly as the notary stamped the final page. That was the core of the whole problem. He never saw me as a person with my own needs or boundaries. He saw me as a resource to be used and discarded. He thought my love for him made me weak, but it actually made me strong enough to demand better. Maribel stood by the door, avoiding my gaze entirely. She looked uncomfortable, her coldness replaced by a jittery anxiety. They had their money, but they had lost their dignity. They had a quick closing, but they had burned every bridge to get it. As I was walking out to my car, the youngest child, who had been waiting in the car with a sitter, ran into my arms. She squeezed me tight and asked, "You're not disappearing now that the papers are signed, right?" I looked at her and whispered, "Never." The payout from the house was enough to change my entire world. Within a month, I used the money as a down payment on a beautiful, small townhouse. It wasn't huge, but it had big windows and sunlight that filled every room. I bought new furniture, stuff that was mine that I chose myself. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't living in someone else's shadow. I wasn't waiting for permission to use the kitchen or feeling guilty for taking a long shower. I woke up in a house that was quiet and peaceful. Most importantly, I was the only one with a key. No one could ever lock me out again. No one could ever tell me I was just a guest in my own life. I started picking up more freelance work and re-establishing the career I had put on hold. My bank account was healthy, and my credit was safe. Then, a few weeks after I moved in, Cade sent me a text. It was short and pathetic. "I made a mistake. Maribel left, and I can't handle the kids and the new job alone. Can we talk?" I read it, felt a small pang of pity, and then I deleted it without replying. Some doors are meant to stay closed. Months have passed now, and the dust has finally settled. The kids still visit me every other weekend. It's not because a court told them to or because Cade asked me to help. It's because they want to be here. We bake cookies, we go to the park, and we talk about their school days. They have a room in my house that is permanently theirs. Cade is polite to me now. He's careful with his words and respectful of my time. It's funny how setting firm boundaries and standing up for yourself can suddenly teach people how to treat you. He realized that the nice sister wasn't a doormat, and he treats me with the caution one gives to someone they can no longer control. The night he tried to evict me, I thought I was losing everything. I thought my world was ending in the rain. But it turns out, that was the exact moment I took my life back. I wasn't the helpless babysitter or the unpaid help anymore. I was a woman who walked away stronger, with my dignity, my stability, and a future that no one could ever steal from me again. I finally realized that the best revenge isn't being mean, it's being happy, successful, and completely independent.